Okay, let's now get back to the example from the real world with vehicles, airplanes, and so on. Let's examine how this hierarchical structure will look like in JavaScript. And let's examine prototype chain. Let's suppose that we will create new instance of the civil plane, and this instance will be called small plane. And we will instantiate this instance with following object. This object is called props, and it contains several properties for this specific instance of the plane. For example, number of seats is 4, wingspan is 15, max range of flight is 2400, and max speed is 800. I will not dive deeper here into the configuration of the function constructor, so just let's leave it as it is now. So we create object with properties, and using this object we instantiate new instance of the civil plane. Later on you will see that this civil plane can be either function constructor or class. Okay, let's move on. In this case, if we create instance of the civil plane, then small plane dot proto will be equal to civil plane dot prototype. That's because small plane was created as instance of the civil plane prototype. Prototype of this prototype is airplane.prototype. That's why this expression is also truthy. Next prototype in this chain is vehicle.prototype. And prototype of this prototype is object.prototype. I have not shown this on this diagram for simplicity. And of course, last prototype in the chain will be null. Please keep in mind that internally JavaScript uses this property to navigate through the prototype chain. Okay, let's move on. If I create new instance of the civil plane using, for example, this object with properties, then after initialization of this object, it will get some own properties. And this instance of the civil plane will contain all properties that were set by every constructor in the prototype chain. For example, this small plane instance will contain such own properties as number of seats, wingspan, max range of flight, and max speed. So, number of seats was set by this prototype. Wingspan and max range of flight were set by this prototype. And max speed was set by this prototype. Important notice, here we are talking about properties, not methods. So, if I try to access property number of seats of the small plane, I will access direct property of this object. And here I will get 4. And this property was set by civil plane constructor. Okay, next. If I try to access wingspan property, this property will be also own property of this small plane object. But now it will be set by airplane during initialization of this small plane object. So here I will get 15. But now interesting part. Let's suppose that airplane prototype contains method called airplane info. And this method returns, for example, such kind of string. So wingspan is and adds value of the wingspan for specific object. And in this case, this object doesn't have this method. This prototype also doesn't have this method. That's why JavaScript will move up through the prototype chain and will find this method only in this prototype. And that's why we will be able to invoke this airplane info method here on this small plane object. And for example, we will get this result. Wingspan is 15 meters. Please note that 15 is a property of small plane object. It is not a property of airplane. It is taken dynamically from this small plane object using reference using this. And we will talk about this later on. Okay, next. Let's suppose that we want to invoke one more method, and it is called vehicle info. And this method is located in this prototype, in vehicle prototype. And again, if I try to access this method here on this object, this method is not available here. We go up through the prototype chain, check whether or not this method is available here. Again, it is absent. Again, move up. Here it is also absent. Move up again, and here this method is found. So it is called, let's suppose, vehicle info. And this method returns such kind of string: max speed and speed of the vehicle. In this case, it is 800. And again, this property is a property of this object. So let's summarize. In this case, we create new instance of the civil plane. And this instance is called small plane. We instantiate it using this object that contains properties. And those properties are set by constructors of different prototypes in the prototype chain. After initialization, you will be able to change those properties. You will be also able to add new properties and methods directly to this object. I have told you about this at the beginning. So in the JavaScript, prototype contains only initial list of properties and methods, and you can adjust them as you want. So add new properties and methods, or remove them or adjust them. Okay, but what is most important in this structure is that methods are located in the prototypes. For example, this method is method of airplane.prototype, and info about vehicle is method of the vehicle. And when you create instances of any prototype, those methods are not copied to any instance. So they are still located in the prototype. No need to copy each method of the prototype to hundreds or thousands of instances of this prototype. It is available using prototypal inheritance. If method is not available here, we go up through the prototype chain until we find this method. If JavaScript engine reaches prototype that is null and method or property is not found, then you'll get an error. Okay, using this example, I wanted to show you how real-world scenario may look like in JavaScript. And I hope that now you understand fully what is prototypal inheritance, what is prototype, what is proto, and how JavaScript finds required method or property. Okay, now we are ready to move on to practical part of this section. And I want to start with function constructors. Next, we will play with function constructors. I will show you how to create prototype chain and how to initialize new instances. See you in a moment. Bye-bye.